This is Paul Knowles. I'm with the Museum of Northwest Colorado here in downtown Craig, and just kind of wanted to share some of our newest acquisitions. We have had a lot of amazing stuff come in the last few years, but some of the items that have come in recently kind of put a cherry on top of that cake. As some of you may know, Jim Baker is a really well-known mountain man. In fact, he has a lot of his roots here. He homesteaded right up almost in Routt County, just actually over the border near today's Dixon and Savory. But he was a contemporary of Kit Carson and Joe Meeks. So this guy really was out and about and is considered the last true mountain man. Well, some of his descendants recently came in and interviewed us for a while and decided they wanted to donate a recently found trunk that had a lot of Jim Baker's personal items, as well as Jim Baker's oldest son's personal items, and as well as one of his grandson's personal items, and some others as well. But those three really are a fascinating trio of artifacts that we just got, and I'd love to show you some of them. Like I said, Jim Baker really is known kind of up on the Little Snake River Valley, but also through here. He hunted out of Fort Davy Crockett, of course, which is in Browns Park. It has a lot of history right here in Northwest Colorado. Included in the donation that we received were some fascinating photos that would have belonged to Jim. One of them is an actual photo of his cabin. Jim Baker's cabin is on display at the Little Snake River Museum up in Savory, Wyoming, and this is an actual photo of it when it was still in its original location. I think it's the only photo known when it was still in the original location. And when I put this in Photoshop and worked on it, it actually says across the top, Jim Baker, 1876. So we're assuming it was probably taken around then even, but yeah, we're really amazing photo. In addition to that, there are some photos that at first glance not many people would recognize who they are, but definitely have some amazing history here in Northwest Colorado. This is J.B. Thompson, and J.B. Thompson was an Indian agent. He's also the founder and the person who named Hayden, Colorado. He was obviously a friend of Jim Baker because we have a couple pictures in here, including one that has J.B. Thompson, and it's written on the bottom of it, yours very truly, James B. Thompson. This is a really pretty fascinating photograph, and it took me a while to figure out. This is most likely a photograph that would have been taken in Washington, D.C., perhaps on some treaty that were frequent back in that era, whether they were worth anything or not. But this photograph shows J.B. Thompson in the middle, and the man to his left, it took me a while, but that is no other than Chief Ouray himself. Chief Ouray, of course, being the main chief of the Ute tribe. Pictures of him aren't exactly very common, and very rarely do you ever see him not just in straight Native American dress. So that's why this one took a while to identify who that was, because he's actually wearing some Western clothes. The other Native American I have not figured out who that is yet, and then the other man in here is one of the interpreters that would have been with them at the time. Another great photo is this. This is actually Jim Douglas, who is the founder of Dixon, Wyoming. And then the man to his right, that old grizzly looking man, is Jim Baker himself, looking very much the mountain man in this photo. A really great photo. And of course, photographs back then were taken with larger negatives, so we can really do a lot with photos from back then when it comes to enlarging. Another great photo that was in with these, there is someone in here that I guarantee you've heard of before, and you may recognize him right off the bat. D.C. Oaks is in this picture, and D.C. Oaks was a surveyor. In fact, he did his first survey around Craig back in 1878. He was also the first owner of Juniper Hot Springs, but he was also an Indian agent, so he is in this photo. But the man who is sitting down there on the right, on your left, is none other than Kit Carson. So that is actually the Kit Carson himself. This was taken in Washington, D.C. So another fascinating photo that was in with Jim Baker's personal effects. And probably one of my favorite photos that was in with this grouping was one that's never before been seen. We see no other copy of it, no other record of it, and this was taken in Salt Lake. The four men, I believe it's four, correct? 1, 2, 3, the four men that are not crouched down are actually unknown, so we don't know who they are. but the man who is with his head in his hand holding his rifle is Jim Baker. This is a younger photograph of Jim Baker, probably when he was in his 50s. So a great photo, and the gun that he is holding is actually the one that's on display in the Little Snake River Museum, so definitely worth checking out. Outside of Jim Baker's personal effects, he had his oldest son, William Baker, who was born in Fort Bridger in the 1850s, went on to become a bounty hunter, and we received some of his effects as well and with this collection. Really fascinating. You don't see a lot of genuine bounty hunter stuff out there, especially locally, but of course that includes his handcuffs. These are a fascinating pair of handcuffs that date to the 1870s with the original keys even. A photograph of William Baker, in fact that is the man himself. He dies in 1893. Don't know why, cannot figure out why he died, but he did pass away before his father did. And then probably one of the coolest artifacts of this whole bunch is William Baker's bounty hunter book. This is his book that he would have carried with him, and you can see he's cutting out wanted ads from the newspaper, and then he's writing what he knows about them, where they were last seen, and this thing is chocked full of all these wanted ads. And it wasn't just for bad dudes either. There's even one here that is a missing child with a very sizable award of $3,000 in the 1880s. So you can imagine what that would be worth today. So this guy was obviously looking to make money any way he could by tracking down individuals. On the back of this book was a fascinating find because it is William Baker's membership card to the Rocky Mountain Detective Agency. This is an early detective agency in Colorado that was founded by David Cook. He wrote a book as well, a fascinating guy tracking down early cattle rustlers and other ne'er-do-wells here in Colorado. But this is the actual membership card with William Baker working for the Rocky Mountain Detective Agency. And as if that wasn't cool enough, this was also in the collection. There is no other example known of this medal. This is a Rocky Mountain Detective Agency medal. There is one other medal that I've seen out there. It's actually just a 5-point star. It says Rocky Mountain Detective Agency around it. This one is way fancier, and on the back of it, you will definitely not be able to see it on camera, but it says DJ Cook, Chief. So that is David Cook himself. There is a chance that this is David Cook's personal badge. I'm not sure how it ended up with William Baker, but we're thinking that there's a chance that that is the case here. Jim Baker also had a grandson who grew up in Little Snake River Valley that also became a bounty hunter and worked with the infamous Bob Meldrum. We have a whole exhibit on Bob Meldrum here in the museum. And they were friends and were helped, they were strike breakers in the Tomboy mine out of Telluride. His name was Willard Runnels was the man's name. And his father was actually murdered in the late 1880s on Little Snake River. In fact, it's one of the very first bounty hunter pages in here is this would be his uncle trying to track down the murderer, a Frenchman by the name of Linier, that he's tracking down who murdered this man's father. So Willard Runnels, in his personal stuff, there are probably 25 different deputization papers where he was getting deputized around the state so he could legally go arrest people as a bounty hunter. But also in there, when I mentioned Bob Meldrum, who is not as well known in the West, but he was considered one of the fastest guns ever out of the Old West. He was very much associated with the Ann Bassett trial. He ended up murdering one of her key witnesses because Bob Meldrum was the town marshal of Baggs and murdered an unarmed man that was supposed to be testifying for Ann Bassett. So there's a lot of suspicion around that. But this is an arrest warrant for Bob Meldrum out of Telluride. I cannot figure out why he was being arrested, but this is an actual arrest warrant for the man himself that was in with this. Like I said, I've looked at newspaper articles, at least cursory, and I just cannot find out why Bob Meldrum was arrested in, this would have been in 1907. So a fascinating find to actually have a arrest warrant for a very, very well-known man out of the West. Also in here, one of these very unexpected surprises, there are letters that were informants that would have been providing information to Willard Runnels for him to go capture these various people. But one of the people obviously he was after was a man by the name of Butch Cassidy. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. This, when we first saw this piece of paper, it was pretty exciting because it's the Silver Dollar Saloon, including stationery. The Silver Dollar Saloon is in Dixon, Wyoming, and was one of the hangouts of Butch Cassidy and other outlaws. So just cool to have a piece of history from that saloon. However, this piece of paper is way more exciting when you realize it was written by the saloon owner himself, Jim Davis. And in here, I'll read you a quick excerpt that he wrote to Willard Runnels, because it turns out he was an informant for the detective agency. He says in here, "I was in Denver in '06 and I kept a close watch for you, but I never saw you in the Elk Parade." Not sure what that is. "You ask about Butch Cassidy. I have not heard that he was here, but his partner is here, Lay." That would be Elza Lay, who was one of Butch Cassidy's main men that he ran around with. And I think there are several others hanging around. There was a fellow that goes by the name of Jack Dempsey, and he came from New Mexico. And I think from their maneuvers, there will be something doing here very soon. So now we know that the owner of the Silver Dollar Saloon was actually an informant because, of course, he had many outlaws in his establishment. Another letter that is in here, kind of referencing the same time period, is from an H.F. Carey, and he writes to Willard Runnels, "Elza Lay," so once again Butch Cassidy's, I wouldn't say right-hand man, but essentially definitely one of the bigger parts of the gang. "Elza Lay and the New Mexican stranger who is known as Jack Dempsey and one or two others left bags about the 10th and were evidently prepared to pull off a job, but what it will be is hard to determine. We may, however, hear from them most any time," and that is from September of 1908. So really fascinating stuff that all came out of kind of unexpectedly from Jim Baker's personal effect. We had no idea that some of Baker's sons and grandsons had such an amazing history behind them as well. So that's just a little bit of what's going on. Like I said, it's been an incredible couple of years as far as acquisitions go, and this is kind of just a small taste of it.